Hey guys, my name is James and welcome to my channel. Now, I know this video might be a bit different from my usual historical content, but with Civilization 6 coming out for free on the Epic Games Store, I managed to get a bunch of friends to try out the game and they all have been enjoying it quite a bit. And in teaching them the game, it gave me the idea to create a video to help not only them, but other new players, especially those which may have only recently downloaded the game and gotten into Civ, never having played any sort of 4X game before. So with this video, I want to help teach some key concepts of Civilization 6, which should hopefully make you understand the game a little better and make you a better player in the long run. And keep in mind, this video is targeted towards people who might only have the base game, so I won't be going too in depth into anything the expansions add. So without further ado, here are 10 tips for Civilization noobs. So my first tip revolves around understanding how the game of Civ works. And so first, I wanted to discuss the genre of Civilization. Games like Civ are described as 4X games, with the 4X meaning you explore the land, you expand your territory, you exploit the resources, and then you exterminate your enemies. Now, with all of that being said, how do we accomplish all of the 4X's? This brings us to Civ's core gameplay loop. And to understand Civ, you need to look at Civ as a digital board game. Civ at its core is a resource collection game, very similar to the board game Settlers of Catan. In order to complete something, such as researching a technology or building a unit, you must accumulate enough of the appropriate resource. To help illustrate how this works, say I want to build a monument in my city to memorialize my greatness. I see that the monument costs 60 production, and based on my city's resources, I'm generating 6.3 production per turn. This means that it will take 10 turns for me to develop this monument and share my glory with the world. And this basic concept can be expanded to all of the game's resources, with those being food for growth, production for building, science for technology, culture for civics, faith for religious units, gold of course being gold, and it even goes into other concepts such as envoys, unit experience, as well as diplomatic favor. The whole game really revolves around this accumulation and spending, slowly snowballing to the end game victory conditions. This slow building up is why it's so easy to want to take just one more turn. Number 2, turning on the HUD and the yield icons. Before you even settle your first city, make sure the 2 following options are selected. Above the minimap, you'll find the Map Options tab. There, select the Show Yield icon button. This shows the yield of each tile and gives you an idea of the resources that you can accumulate from that tile. This then will help you make better decisions. Next, go to your options. Then select Interface, and under Show HUD ribbon, be sure to set this to Always Show. This shows you the amount of the major yields each civ is receiving at the top right corner. This in turn helps give you a better sense of your relative strength in the game. Tip number 3, and a question I always get, is what's a good opening and how do I start the game? Now, keep in mind, my advice here isn't law and you should try out whatever you desire, but this is more so to help give some guidance in case you're kind of struggling. So with your first settler, generally speaking, especially for beginners, unless you see a tile which is immediately better, I would just settle in place. Taking too long to settle your first city sets you back in turns to accumulate these resources, and Civ is a game all about snowballing, so getting your snowball started early is definitely important. There are of course cases where maybe your starting location is terrible, and in which case, post it on Reddit and then So now that you have your first city settled, you might be asking, so what's a good first thing to build? And I actually think there's a lot of different viable openings, whether it be any of the available starting projects. I think each of these can be viable to an extent, depending on game difficulty. However, the ones I usually go for first are a scout on lower difficulties, and a slinger or a warrior at higher difficulties. This is because my early priority is scouting the land and making sure I protect myself from barbarians. Next, you might be asking, what do I research? And this largely depends on what's around you. I would focus my research to improve the tiles within your cities. You can figure that out by hovering over the resource icon, and it'll tell you the technology you need in order to harvest that resource. If you're ever in trouble or in doubt, definitely go archery, as this helps you defend against barbarians, and in my opinion, archers are pretty much the best unit in the game for a variety of reasons. Overall, they are pivotal to having a good early defense. And now you might be asking, what civic should I be going for? And my general rule of thumb here is, I like to rush over to political philosophy. The reason for this is that having a government with extra policy cards is game changing. If you go to war, consider also getting military tradition, as that gives you a flanking bonus, which helps make your units a little bit stronger. And my final tip of the early game is to make sure you settle new cities quickly, as land can get tight quite fast. Also, be sure to get your district set up, as this will be the infrastructure that carries you into the late game. Now with all that being said, this brings me to tip number 4. Focus on infrastructure by playing lean. In any strategy game, whether it be a 4X game like Civ, or an RTS game like StarCraft, ideally you want to play as lean as possible. This means that you want to be able to survive while building as few units as possible. This is because you ideally want to focus most of your time and production on your infrastructure, which ultimately is what brings you to victory. The best way to do this is to play defensive. Keep just enough units to defend yourself and focus on expanding and establishing districts. Especially when you get to higher difficulties, the game becomes a lot about surviving until the point when you can slingshot yourself past the AI. Tip number 5. Build wide. Civ 6 took a different approach to managing cities with the amenities system. As a result, Civ 6 makes it significantly easier to build a wide empire, which consists of many smaller cities rather than a tall empire, which is one with fewer, larger cities. In my experience, the largest civ is usually going to be the strongest, as they will be able to accumulate the most resources and create the most districts. You also don't even need to settle cities that far apart, as being wide naturally means your cities usually won't be able to grow to their full capacity anyway. And while oftentimes you'll want to maximize your city size by settling 6 tiles away, since each city can only expand 3 tiles out, I've often seen players settle 5, 4, or even 3 tiles away from each other, which actually can help, especially since you can get different bonuses by putting infrastructure next to each other. And so of course, to build wide, you need to settle quite a few cities. And this brings us to number 6, where do I settle? And there's a ton of great videos that really look in depth at this concept, but I want to just give you a few of these concepts to help you think about where you should be settling your cities. Usually, when I settle, there's a few things I consider. 1. What are the resources by it, and will the yields justify settling there? Generally, I will look for at least one luxury, because who doesn't like some chocolate? But you will want to make sure that the city will have enough food and production to sustain itself. Number 2. I like to look at how close is the enemy. Will this position be strategic in me being able to establish more power in the area? Additionally, how close is it to my empire, and can I properly defend this land? As the game progresses, there will naturally become points on the map which seem like good barriers, and usually I try to settle in these places to prevent the AI from moving up on my territory. Number 3. Is there water? While I don't think this is necessarily as important as the first two, another important thing to consider is if you are by a source of fresh water. This is because having this water naturally increases your housing, making it so you can avoid having your growth stifled and wasting time on building housing. So now that you've decided where to settle your next cities, this brings us to tip number 7. Escort your civilians. If you've played any other Civ game before, you probably already know this one, but any new players will want to keep this one in mind. Make sure to keep army units on or at least near your civilian units. In Civ 6, they added a way to create an escort formation, so your units never have to leave each other's side. And to do this, make sure you have an army unit and a civilian unit on top of each other. Select one of them and you should see a button at the bottom right, which says Create Escort Formation. But keep in mind that the movement of the pair will always be limited to the lower of the units. So if you have a horseman connected to your settler, they will only be able to move as far as the settler does. This way, as long as you're escorting your settlers and builders, if any enemy or barbarian ever comes by, they won't be able to steal your precious civilian. And speaking of barbarians, this brings us to tip number 8. Kill barbarians early, or suffer. Barbarians are annoying as hell to play against, especially in Civ 6, but can be useful as 1, they tend to mess with the AI a lot, and 2, they provide units with experience. The easiest way to protect yourself from barbarians is to deny the barbarian scout from ever approaching your lands. If you see the exclamation mark over the scout's head, it means that it has identified you and will be returning to his encampment to start a raid. These raids generally consist of units that have been researched by any civ, so if one civ happened to rush into horse archers, you may end up facing some terrifying barbarians. When taking them out, try to approach them with more than one unit. Having a melee unit makes it easier to take out the barbarian camp too. And be sure to eliminate the camp. Not only do you get some bonuses, it will stop barbarians from spawning at that point. However, if you can control them, keeping a camp alive can actually be useful to gain experience for your army. Another tip regarding barbarians is, keeping vision over a region will make it so barbarians will not be able to spawn in that area. So be sure to keep some units spread out across your lands, especially in those areas which the fog of war has hit. Tip number 9, playing a balanced game. In general, you're going to want to play a balanced game, meaning you're going to want to make sure that you can keep up in science, culture, as well as the other resources when compared to other civs. But remember that science and production are generally king. Even though you might have a specific victory type you want to go for, sometimes the game doesn't always go the way you expect. And for that reason, I think playing a balanced game is usually your best bet, as it allows you to adapt with the changing environment. Even in games where you might be going for other victory types, it's important to keep up in science, culture, and production, as not doing so will likely mean you'll fall behind in the long run. Falling behind in science also usually means your military will likely be weaker, and you can't win the game if you're dead. Tip number 10, and I know this one's going to be corny, but honestly, just have fun. Civ is a game which, ultimately for me at least, is meant to be very relaxing. Try it out alone, try it out with friends, try out different civs and different wonders, and figure out how you like to play. Civ allows you so many different approaches to the game and how you want to run your empire, and that can vary between games even. So really, my main suggestion is just to try out the game. See what you like, see what you don't like, see what's powerful, see what's not powerful, and from there, continue to develop your skills. So that's it, guys. Those are 10 tips that I had to better understanding Civ and becoming a better Civ player. If you found this video helpful or enjoyed it, please do consider hitting that like button, maybe even subscribing for some more Civilization content. And please do let me know if you would like more tips around Civilization. I have a bunch more that I've written down, especially after teaching my friends how to play the game. So I am more than happy to try to help people become better Civ players. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.